This should be very simple, and you'll see from my presentation how maybe those of us at the USDA definitely need help from people who are interested in informatics and connecting data. Now, I've only been with the ARS for a year and a half with my previous life in academic medicine, so I could probably relate to Franz Limited or Incorporated type of data a bit more. But our basic interest, we have 6 human nutrition research centers that are supported by the Agricultural Research Service, one of which, as John had pointed out, sits on this campus. And the goal there is really trying to figure out what constitutes a healthy diet and how do we maintain health through food. And needless to say, we're not very good at knowing how to get our web pages short such that everybody can remember it, but if you just search for BHNRC, you'll find our home page. So we have 5 laboratories in the BHNRC, and what I've highlighted in red are the 3 laboratories that handle food composition databases, as well as databases that relate to the food surveys that are conducted as part of the NHANES initiative, funded through the CDC and managed in collaboration with the USDA through the Human Health Services, the HSS. So the databases that we do have available through the BHNRC include the flagship USDA National Nutrient Database for Standard References, and oftentimes this is referred to as the gold standard for food composition. And in there, it's usually released annually, but we're undergoing a process of trying to modernize all of this, which is one of the reasons we're here with you today, was to seek some of your help and advice as to how we go about creating an ontology and allowing us to be able to connect with many other databases that exist in fields that John had mentioned earlier. The next one that we have is the database that we call What We Eat in America, which is part of the NHANES arm of the dietary surveys that are taken every 2 years, and essentially produces information as to the types of foods and nutrients that are shortfall or in excess for the cross-sectional selection of individuals who participate in these surveys across the country. In addition, we have a dietary supplements ingredients database, which we do in conjunction with the NIH Office of Dietary Supplements, and that database is housed in the National Library of Medicine. In addition, we recently released the Branded Foods Products Database, which is a public-private partnership between ILSI North America, GS1 and One World Sync and Label Insight. And this initiative was really to allow us to bring in from industry their labeled information about what is in the specific foods that are on the market that our public are consuming. And this has been a change in the USDA databases in that this will be one of the first databases that will coexist within our foods umbrella that will then feed into standard reference such that one can tell from industry what is in the food supply and what people are consuming. And this will make it much, much easier for investigators to be able to determine what is the normal or average intake of various foods across the country. And so we've just had a dump of about 80,000 foods. John, is that right? 80 to 90,000 foods just in the last month. And this, again, is all available through our portal, through the National Agricultural Library. Finally, we have a number of special interest databases, which include ones on fluoride, flavonoids, isoflavones, proanthocyanins, sulfur-containing compounds, etc. And these are all specialized databases that, again, will be under our foods umbrella. But as you can imagine, what we're challenged by is how do we connect all of these in with common vocabulary. What thesaurus do we use, and what is the ontology that we can use such that we can help users of these databases to go in and know that they can get the unusual, the multiple different names for different food components. So this is going to look very simple and naive for all of you, but this was the original thought for what we're calling our foods data system, in which case we'll have an external portal where raw data could come into our master database, and we'll have multiple modules under this umbrella through which we get the standard reference, the FNDDS, which is what is part of NHANES, other research databases, and these links are really trying to link out to all of the types of databases that you have been discussing or that we've been discussing this morning. And that's related to this full spectrum of the food system, from production through agricultural and environmental and climate effects on food. Where does food come from? But I think from the standpoint of being in medicine and healthcare, I think one of the important things is that we still have not established cause and effect for some of the changes that we might see in food composition as a function of the way we grow foods, or how climate might affect the nutrient content of specific foods. So therein lies a gap, and so before we begin truly connecting a lot of health outcomes with specific components within food, I do think we still need some of this basic research that'll allow us to connect disease entities and food and its components. Because we eat food as a whole thing, not specific nutrients per se, although there's no doubt a huge industry that is trying to promote consumption of specific components that we do find within foods as being healthful. And I think it is our responsibility to begin to do research to try to better understand what claims we can make that's based on scientific evidence to the best of our ability. On this next slide, I've just briefly highlighted what NHANES is about. I'm sure many of you have heard about it, but the USDA is responsible primarily for the What We Eat in America side, which is a dietary intake collection and data release of the foods that people eat as part of the NHANES survey that is done every 2 years. And the survey integration responsibilities that we have is that the Department of Health and Human Services is responsible for the sample design and survey operation. But as I mentioned earlier, the USDA is responsible for the dietary methodology, data collection, review, and processing, including the nutrient values of foods and beverages. And it's within this sphere that we certainly can use your assistance with respect to how do we best utilize and even collect some of these data using the new technologies that now exist. And so in the Food and Nutrient Database for Dietary Studies database that we have, as you can see, we simply code a number of the foods and assess the nutrient content of these foods that Americans are eating. But again, we need to sort of find a way to know whether or not these differences that we're finding across the different demographic groups in different parts of the country really do connect back to health outcomes that are important. So finally, as John had mentioned, the USDA has also developed a database that they've called the Nutrient Uptake and Outcome Network, from which we see an important part that the USDA national nutrient databases could play in connecting multiple other databases that exist within ARS that could contribute to us having a better understanding about what are healthful foods, as well as how to best produce healthy foods in the amounts that we'll need for the growing population. So thank you.